I'm Jason, I'm an alcoholic.
What up, Jason?
Patrick, happy birthday. And, it's stuff like what Patrick said when I was new, that didn't really make any sense to me, you know, and that works. And I'll tell you, I got sober. My sobriety date is April 21st, 1998. I was 31 years old when I walked in these doors, and I've been here ever since. You know, I haven't done a perfect program, but I've been able to figure out how to stick around here. It's a great room, great meeting. You know, I'll try to share a little bit of, I think what I always try to share with people of, which is my joy for this program and how this program has saved my life and how everything I have in my life today is because of this program. So I'll try to share a little bit of that with you. I'll try to share a little bit about how it worked for me, although, you know, I'll just really scratch the surface of this book that happens to be perfectly placed in front of me. And maybe you'll have some, if you haven't already done it, dig into that with the help of somebody else. So I'm the oldest of four. I'll just give you a quick, I'm going to look at this time, I'll just give you some quick information. I'm the oldest of four. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. No one in my family is an alcoholic that I know of. Like, I have three younger sisters, they're not alcoholics. My dad's not an alcoholic, my mom's not an alcoholic. I had a grandmother who had a really extensive pill collection, which I was able to kind of dip into when I needed. I don't know what her story was, but that's pretty much it. So I came here because I really wanted to. You know, I really got into drinking. I would say I felt like something was wrong with me, which I think like a lot of alcoholics can relate to. I kind of see that as my alcoholism in the sense that, like, what was wrong? I don't know. You know, I had a lot of different things that I thought were wrong. Like, I did not feel loved. I did not feel understood. You know, I had a lot of fear growing up. You know, I'll quickly say that, like, when we started reading about the presidents, and I started to think that, like, wow, there's all these people buried in the ground, and I'm gonna one day be buried in the ground. And I was like, whatever, 5, 6 years old, and I'm like walking around the house. But I was really afraid, but I was more afraid of my dad, that if I like went in there and like woke up my parents and started talking to them about it, that I would really get in a lot of trouble. So I don't know. I never felt like great, and then around 14 years old, I was working at a summer camp, and these guys who were older than me bought a 12-pack of Moosehead beer, and we went up on the tennis court like one night and like listened to Jethro Tull, and like started drinking this Moosehead beer, and I passed out. Like, I remember like some of the feeling. I remember looking up at the stars, and it was a really long way from where I slept from those tennis courts, and I have no idea how I got there. And the next day I felt really, really sick, and I was like committed to never doing this again, like, because I felt so sick. I mean, I had, you know, they talk about in the book this allergy. I had the allergy from the beginning. Like, I just had a really hard time. Now, a lot of practice, I was able to figure out how to drink, and, you know, with some other things that I mixed in there, I was able to, like, you know, use this thing for a long time. But so it started off that way, and it worked for me. Like, it worked for me. I was in high school, they called me Spacin'. You know, I was the guy who just was like off in space, you know, and I loved it. You know, I really did love it, and it whatever it was that I was uncomfortable, whatever the things that I didn't want to feel, it worked pretty good. And then I had a moment of clarity, like right before I went to college, where I was working with these guys who were cocaine addicts and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It was a summer job, and this guy gets his paycheck, and the boss says to him, "Hey man, don't snort that whole thing." And I just started laughing. I thought it was so funny. And then I realized, like, he really meant it. And it made me realize, like, this guy's name was Rodney. I'm like Rodney. And I had this moment of clarity, and I called a friend of mine, and I asked her, like, how do you know if you're like an alcoholic? You know, like, I don't think I even knew that term alcoholic. I think, how do you know if you have a problem? And she's like, well, if you're asking if you have a problem, you probably have a problem. And, so for like the next 13 years of my life, I tried to control and enjoy my drinking. Did not work. I could not control and enjoy it. I could enjoy it, but not control it. And when I was trying to control it, I definitely wasn't enjoying anything about life. And, I had a lot of plans. I had a lot of opportunities and plans, and drinking and using made all that go away. And I would be on the way to a really important business meeting, and I would take drugs. I would be at a really important dinner, and my business partner would tell me, hey, don't drink, or just have one drink. And somewhere in there, that didn't happen, and the person who I'm trying to sell, I'm screaming at. So it didn't really work out very well for me, and since I've been sober for a while, and that's a big part of my life, I'm going to just kind of switch over and tell you a little bit about that at this point. I mean, hopefully I convinced you that I am an alcoholic. I do have this disease, and so I was working with this guy, and he was sober, and he had been a heroin addict, and we would go out to lunch, and he would tell me all these crazy stories, I was on an airplane, and I shot up on the airplane, and then they arrested me, and everything was just so much fun. He didn't, he was completely honest. He had no secrets at all, and my whole life up until that point was a complete secret. I never told anybody anything that was the truth, and I never answered my phone at night. And if I did, you were gonna hear me and I would be yeah, I had this really bad cough. I took cough medicine. I'd show up at work, and I would say, oh yeah, I was always telling some story to just try to keep everyone away and not really let you see what was really going on with me. So I was it was, they say this is a program of attraction. I was really attracted to what this guy. And then I met this girl, and she was sober, and she asked me, we went on this date, and she asked me how much you drink and use, and I totally lied to her, and then I woke up again. I had this moment of clarity. I used to wake up in a cold sweat every night, around 2 o'clock, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought it was something to do with my apartment and the air conditioning and everything. And I had this, and I'm I'm an addict. And I went to work the next day, and I was smoking at the time, and I'm just smoking. I'm going in and out, smoking. And I was this guy's boss, and he looks at me and he says, what's wrong? And I didn't say anything, and then after a few minutes I go, I think I have a problem like you. And he was like, okay, nothing. We worked the whole day, it gets to 5 o'clock, and I'm I'm just gonna go home, right? I don't know what to do. And he looks at me and he says, hey, you want to go to a meeting? And I'm like, okay. So we go to his car. At that point, we had meeting directories, and he pulls out the meeting directory, and it turns out there's a meeting, 5 minutes away from where we work. We go to the meeting. It's in this trailer. It was there was a school, and they were doing remodeling. It's in this trailer that they were doing the classrooms out of, and walked up. At that point, this guy who was a giant TV star is standing outside of this trailer. He shakes my hand and he's like, welcome. And that was told, I'm like, wow, this is super weird. I don't know what's going on here. I didn't know anything about this thing, And go in, I identify, I say I'm a newcomer, I stand up and I say, I'm Jason, I'm an alcoholic. And when I say I'm Jason and I'm an alcoholic, I felt something. It started to make sense, my life. This whole thing of my life, I would get my life to a certain place, and then it would just topple over, and that made sense to me. I shared a little bit that night. It was one of those meetings where they called on you, he called on me, I went up, and my friend told me, he's like, look, you don't have to do anything at the end of the meeting. He says, you don't have to do anything. He's like, my suggestion is do 90 and 90, get a sponsor, and start reading this book. And I had that moment of clarity before, right? I had the moment, and it took a long time to get back to that, I didn't do anything with it, right? And so here I was, had this moment of clarity. My life was going totally in the opposite direction of what I wanted. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And, you know, I did it. And a lot of, like, you know, they talk about, like, your character defects. And, you know, the character defects are like when things are not in balance. But, you know, you can have pride. I mean, you can, did not want to have to come back here and stand up again, right? Like, I stood up for 30 days, every meeting. I took my chips. You know, people knew I was new, and, you know, like, and they hazed the crap out of me, you know, like, being a new guy. Like, I mean, I had so many resentments from, like, the way I was treated in the beginning of this thing, and it made me like, hey, I don't want to do this again. Like, I'm gonna stay here. Like, I don't want to go through this shit, and so I did everything they told me. It took me a few sponsors to really get through those steps. I had my first sponsor, my temporary sponsor, and then he stopped calling me back, and then I had the second sponsor. We got in a giant fight, you know, like working the 4-step. I got a third sponsor. I think we got through all, I mean, but, you know, and I'm looking at the time, I don't want to get into all that, but I got through those steps. And, you know, and I got a life beyond my wildest dreams. You know, it wasn't the life I wanted, but it was this crazy life. And, you know, and I started to think like, hey, it's me. I got this life. I did it, right? And I stopped doing this thing the way I was doing it. You know, I did everything you told me to do for those first few years. I had a panel. I was driving guys to meetings. I was doing everything. You know, and my life was getting better. Like, it really was. And then I'm like, oh wow, I got this amazing life, and you know, let's see how little of this I can do. And, you know, I got to the point where I had 10 years sober, and I was in really bad shape, you know, in the sense that the insanity came back. And it was crazy, and I didn't know what to do. And I also lost hope. You know, like they say, you do these steps in the reverse order, right? And so I did not believe. Like, step 2 to me is really one of the most important steps, because it's like you have to believe in a power greater than yourself is going to restore you to sanity. And, like, I got to believe in this program. Like, I have to believe all the stuff that Patrick said is going to work. Or, like, where the fuck am I, right? Like, if I don't believe that, like, folding my laundry or, like, doing all this nutty stuff is going to actually make me, or, like, calling some new person, like, if I don't believe that, then I don't have a program, right? So you know, I'm sitting there, it's 11:30 at night, and you know, I say to people, like, if you're new, get trudging buddies, right? Like, it's the people, like, I went to so many meetings with my trudging buddies, and, like, we took everybody's inventory, you know, we just, like, just made fun, like, everyone who shared, like, oh wait, this guy's gonna share, like, he's gonna say X, Y, Z, and, you know, and we had so much fun doing that, and that was my program at that point. But so one of those guys, like, my wife's like, do this, like, my wife's over, she's like trying to help me, like, because I was really fucking out of my mind, and it had been going on for a number of weeks. And she's like, call Jeff. And I called Jeff, and Jeff's like, hey, you know, you have your 12 and 12. Well, I didn't throw away my 12 and 12. I'm like, yeah, I got it. He's like, read step 1 and call me back. It's like 11:30 at night on a Friday, I read step 1, I call him back, and we just start working the steps. I mean, you know, over the phone, and I work all the steps with him, and, you know, like, it fucking worked again. Like, again, I was restored to sanity. And, you know, and at that point, I'm like, all right, it's like I had a heart attack. Like, am I gonna just have a heart attack and just do all the stupid shit I was doing before? I'm like, no, I'm not, you know? And that's my program today. And I would say, you know, I've got like about 3 minutes left, and it's, you know, if you look at the book, it's like, look at the steps they write the most about, you know, and like really focus on like, if you think about, hey, they wrote this much, like, that's kind of how much work I really want to put into that step. And like those first 3 steps, you know, you're probably there with the first 3 steps. You know, it's like, I think, for me, like I said, step 2 is really an important one, because you have, if you don't believe in this thing, like I've tried to help people, they're like super believe in God, but they don't believe in this program. You know, like they don't, and if you don't believe in the program, right, that like a power greater than yourself, like, which to me starts with like this, and like the shit we're doing here, like if you don't believe in that, you're gonna have a hard time. That's what my experience. So if you kind of get through those first 3 steps, It's like, hey, let's do some work so that actually you can like find some higher power that's whatever that is for you, have some sort of like spiritual awakening, right? Like, and help some other people. And so for me, just do those steps. Like it doesn't really have to be that hard. I mean, in my mind, like step 4, write some of those resentments down and talk to somebody, and they'll help you work through the first few of them, and then you'll figure out how to do step 4, and step 5. I mean, 6 and 7, I'm always in 6 and 7. I have these character defects, and I need to get into the right place. And the humility thing is, for me, really big, because I gotta see my defects. I gotta see that, like, I'm always gonna be out of balance, and that I'm always gonna be, leaning into one thing or another, and it's gonna cause issues with other people. And so I've got to try to balance that out. Obviously you got to make your amends. That's pretty straightforward, although you should do it with your sponsor. And now with step 10, I mean, I write down the stuff. If I have any doubt, I talk to my sponsor about whether I need to make an amends or I don't need to make an amends. I do an inventory every day. I got 1 minute left. And then, I pray, which is like asking God for direction. I listen to whatever God's going to tell me. That's the meditation part. And it's ultimately about helping someone else. I mean, that is the way to stay sober. Like the way, when I say sober, like to have the thing, look, the thing that I got when the drugs and alcohol were working for me was pretty amazing. Like I had some pretty amazing moments where I felt completely out of myself. Like I felt exactly the way I wanted to feel. And helping another alcoholic, I feel that way. I lose myself. I know I'm here for a purpose, right? Like my purpose is just to help someone else. It's not, my sponsor says there's nothing to get, help others, and it'll turn out better than you can imagine. And that's really been what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. Tony, thank you for letting me share it tonight.